Hi, and welcome to Conversations to Thrive. My name is Vasi. I'm founder of the Thrive community on School, www.school.com/release the weight. And I'm really excited to have here today with us Charles Fielder. He's going to be sharing insights from his experience with GLP-1 drug Wegovy. I've never had experiences with GLP-1 drugs, as many of you know. My own journey included intermittent fasting and mindset and things like that. So I'm really excited to hear from him about how he used these drugs and how he used them actually to develop more strength and vitality for life. Because they can, they don't have that effect on everybody. Some people use them and they have the opposite effect where they feel like they're less strong and weaker. So I'm going to turn the floor over to you, Charles, and excited to hear what you have to share with us and teach us.
Well, thanks a lot, Vasi. I really appreciate having the opportunity to share elements of my story. And it was actually Manjaro that I take. And
Sorry, I totally messed that up. But yeah, Manjaro, Manjaro.
no worries. All these GLP-1s, have some common elements, and Manjaro is one that's slightly different. So, but yeah, I really I'm happy to talk about this, and I wanted to present in a way that would, benefit your community, people who may be interested in GLP-1s and people who are absolutely not interested in GLP-1s, but what might they learn from my experience? And so that's why I came with the longevity lens. And so, yeah, let me share a slide deck, and we'll get going. Let's see. I think that's not sharing the right one, is it? We will try that one more time. There we are. Okay, so you can see that okay.
Yes.
All right. So again, the title I came up with was Reinforcing Metabolic Infrastructure for Longevity. Uh, Fundamentally, let me give some background first, but first some disclaimers, right? I'm sharing informational insights. These are from my own experience, my own observations, and my own learning. So, while I expect these insights can help most anyone, variables come into play that turn results into um, that make results varied for everybody. Whether you're on a GLP-1 or not. So I'm not a doctor. Um, so I strongly encourage people to consult your own medical providers on any significant health decisions. But hopefully this is informational and something that you can go and talk with your doctors about. A little personal context. I was an engineer and leader in the computer and telecom hardware sectors for almost 30 years. And, I retired from that and pivoted into leadership coaching. And most currently, I'm a leadership capacity coach. And I'll maybe talk a little bit more about that further into just a little bit into the presentation. But this all came about because of a diabetes diagnosis that occurred to me right after I retired from the tech industry, and got me started on Manjaro back in July of 2023. At that time, I weighed about 300 and actually that should be 354 pounds. I have a typo. So, um, and through that journey, ultimately it's kind of a long-term sort of slow motion revelation, right? That weekly injections would not build durable health fundamentally. And so that's what's gotten me to where I am today. That's what's got me to my results and the way I see things going forward. It's not just about an intervention. It's about how do I stay vital and keep my weight loss and thrive as I move forward in life, right? And I want to keep that going till the end of life as best I can. And I have a wholly renewed motivation to do that. So that comes to our system's perspective on longevity. So what is longevity? I'm seeing it as extending our well-being through and beyond normal life expectancy, right? So I want to be non-average, right? I've always wanted to be non-average in different ways. I want to be non-average absolutely in my well-being through life expectancy, right? So my life expectancy, I'd love to live to 100 years old or more, but only if the quality of life is good, right? And so that's what it's about. You may ask what well-being is. So well-being is fundamentally it's a multidimensional concept that characterizes a positive state of human functioning. And these dimensions here are highly interdependent, right? So the physical dimension, emotional dimension, social dimension, intellectual and creativity, right? There's occupational wellness, financial wellness, and spiritual wellness. So these are all highly interdependent on each other, and our well-being um, is very much dependent on giving attention to every one of these areas as we move forward in life. It's about maintaining balance across these interdependent domains. So and real quick, we're going to focus mostly on that physical element today, even though the emotional and intellectual really come into play. Even financial comes into play in how you deal with all this. So I just to me it helps set a context in terms of looking at it from a systems view, right? For instance, right, moods affect the way you eat. How you exercise can affect your moods. What you can afford to buy in groceries or what you can afford in medications. Your health affects your financial wellness as well in the opposite direction. So this is just describes the systemic interdependence of these different domains. So we have that also with the structural realities of aging. Fundamentally, we have physiological resilience declines that are just part of natural aging. It doesn't matter if we have any disease or other conditions, these things happen to us anyway. We have skeletal muscle loss, strength and functional capacity loss, bone mineral density loss, hormonal changes, or metabolic efficiency declines, and our recovery takes longer, right? These are all things that just happen every year. It declines more, right? So we want to work on systems that help us fight that, right, and mitigate the declines as best we can. We can't win that battle, but we can sure put up a good fight, right? So let's talk about the structural drivers of longevity. We have surfacing indicators versus structural drivers. So, the surfacing indicators are, indicators of progress. So we see our weight drop. We see that on the scale, right? We see our clothing fit changes. Our clothes fit us differently, right? So I have all kinds of baggy clothes now, right? And I've had to buy new clothes every few months. And, it's both a blessing and a curse. Having to I can only buy a couple things at a time, right? Because it was dropping so fast, and otherwise I'm wasting money because I can only wear them so long, right? So, but we also have things like improved blood pressure or A1C, blood glucose, and there's lots of other sort of visual or observational indicators, and these are all good. These are goals we all have, but they're just indicators, right? So what we want to talk about is structural drivers, right? And these are physiological systems that determine the durability that we want. So that brings us to metabolic infrastructure, and so I see metabolic infrastructure as the physiological capacity that supports energy production, physical strength and functioning, and the recovery across our lifespans. It's the foundation determining the durability of our health interventions. So we'll talk about that more as we go on. It really kind of spans three pillars, right? There's musculoskeletal capacity, There's energy capacity and recovery and adaptation capacity. In the musculoskeletal capacity domain, we have the skeletal muscle mass, right? Dr. Gabrielle Lyons, she talks about muscle mass as the organ of longevity. I really like that thought, and the idea here is it really is fundamental to so many processes in our body, to the muscular strength, to helping shore up our bone mineral density, right? It helps us with movement and balance. Even as we age, it provides additional cushioning if we have falls, right? The more the more frail we are, the more likely we're going to have falls, and the more likely we're going to have damaging falls as we age, right? So skeletal muscle helps all these things. It also helps the other on the other side of things as well, in terms of metabolic benefits, right? It's a great sink for blood glucose, right? Serum glucose. The more muscle mass you have, the more your body will consume, even when at rest. So it helps with insulin sensitivity, right? Then there's energy capacity, right? And this is about energy production, right? Low level mitochondrial energy. This is the ATP, energy turnover within your body, right? So you're constantly, um, processing the food that you eat into energy that your body consumes for living and for what you use it to function, right? So then, as I mentioned, there's insulin sensitivity and glucose regulation. Um, that's both a factor of your lean mass and what you eat and the timing of what you eat. And then there's your metabolic rate and flexibility. So these are all things that we have to keep attention on. And finally, there's recovery and adaptation capacity. This is about sleep quality. This is about tissue regeneration and repair, and our body's ability to do that. It's about hormonal regulation, right? These hormones are signals for all these systems in our body. And if we have, that signaling out of whack, then our body doesn't behave like it should. We start seeing, things like diabetes, right? If we're not managing the blood glucose and the insulin, then we get diabetes, and that causes all kinds of other downstream reactions and effects, right? So there's inflammation control. Inflammation affects all of these systems, and then there's adaptation. Let's think of this in terms of beneficial adaptation to training and to stress, right? So um, we want to, we want our body to be able to react accordingly. We want muscles to be able to grow. We want fat stores to diminish. We want to be able to flush out the cortisol and the other hormonal signals that keep us from sleeping or keep us from um, making the progress that we want to make. So where do our efforts commonly misalign with longevity goals? This is certainly key in my case. Lots of good intentions and assumptions, right? An overemphasis on those service indicators, right? Weight and the clothing fit. A lack of resistance training, emphasizing cardio over resistance training. If you're doing resistance training, maybe you're doing high rep and low weight. I know that there's a lot of online classes and gym related things where you're in group classes, and they do a lot of high repetition, low weight type of stuff, which is good, but it's more of a cardio workout than it is strength training. Dr. Mary Harriet Claver in the menopause world, she talks about using weights that are better than those namby-pamby pink weights, she calls them, right? So you need to use bigger weights. And then there's stress management, sleep, and recovery, being treated as secondary or just fundamentally being ignored. That was one of my biggest issues, was ignoring recovery and sleep. it wasn't even secondary. I didn't want to deal with it. It took up time. So then there's also, presumptions over observed metrics, right? So are we getting sufficient protein? Are we getting sufficient fiber, hydration? Are we balancing our carbohydrates with our actual energy expenditure? With our what we're getting in exercise and non-exercise spent expenditure every day. Are we managing our fats appropriately? Not enough will affect our hormonal balance. Too much can affect other systems, and so we need to really pay attention to all that. And then there's also chronically low energy intake. On the GLP-1, that's a huge one. It just dramatically curbs your appetite, and so if you're never hungry and you only eat when you're hungry, you're never going to get enough overall nutrition, right? So if you want to thrive, you really need to pay attention to all of these, optimize them, and give full intention on hitting those targets. And if you don't have to track it daily, although I strongly recommend doing that. And I do. I still track every single thing I eat and every exercise I do, and make sure that I'm in balance. Um, but fundamentally, at least doing it occasionally to make sure that you're still on track with where you want to need to be, right? And to make sure that your presumptions aren't, um, telling you a lie, right? So I think that this is where observed metrics help over presumed. And finally, there's the biomarker trends. These are your lab values, and perhaps some other things that you can observe outside of the lab. Key message is visible progress can obscure structural capacity declines. We want to make sure that we're always on top of those declines, and that way we can act and, presumably we can get out in front of them. But if we're not in front of them, we can see it when it's happening and we can make changes and stop that decline and maybe turn it around. So visibility before optimization, we really have to see what we have before we can make real changes. So I like to look at actionable data, and that looks like let's prioritize some key metrics. Let's establish some baselines and then monitor regularly to guide those decisions. So the key areas are one of the key areas is nutrition, and for me, those key metrics are protein, fiber, hydration, overall intake, fat, carbs, and micronutrients, and it's likely in that order, right? In that priority order. And for me, I used Chronometer, and I highly recommend using something like Chronometer, MyFitnessPal. Again, even if you only use it for 2 weeks, you're gonna discover things about the way that you eat, what you eat, and the way you eat that you are presuming um, something different before. I've been doing this for 2 years now. I've been tracking my food, and still, every month I learn something new because of something different I've done, or something I haven't eaten in a while. I'm still learning. Wow, I I thought that was more healthy, or I thought that was um, less calories or more calories, or my latest discoveries are, wow, I'm really not getting enough calories, even though I'm eating like crazy. So, my current calorie target is about 2,500 calories a day, because of the amount of exercise that I'm getting. And this is a deficit, from my, necessary, well, to balance. If I was to maintain, I'd have closer to 3,000 calories, right? So I'm at just under a 500 calorie deficit. But trying to eat 2,500 calories on a GLP-1 is a gargantuan challenge, and making sure I'm getting all the protein I need. And for me, that's 150 grams, roughly, per day, and the fiber, another 35 grams. That tends to fill you up, and you still need the fat, and I need a whole lot of carbs to fuel the workouts that I'm doing because I'm now working out 7 days a week. And so, um, this is fundamental in terms of understanding where you're at, even where you even if you only do it for a couple of weeks. So, and again, think about if it's not something you can commit to long term, at least commit to checking it over 1 to 2 weeks. Maybe every few months, maybe a couple times a year. Do something that helps you keep up with that.
Okay. Can I ask you a quick question, Charles?
Absolutely, yes.
How do you decide your optimal protein? You said it's 150. Do you have a way to measure that, or is that just something you've
Yeah,
kind of?
no, a lot of literature there's a lot of confusing messaging on this in the across the internet. The literature, the scientific literature, indicates that a range of zero point 0.8 grams to 1.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight um, is the range of that most people should deal with. Now, zero point 0.8 is sort of the bottom, right? This is where you got to have zero point 0.8 per kilogram to keep from being mal uh, to keep from malnutrition, right? And interestingly, early in my journey, I wasn't getting enough protein. I was getting less than 80, uh, and it showed up in my labs, and my doctor scolded me basically for not not having sufficient nutrition. I'm like, well, you didn't tell me. I just ate less of what I always ate, but I kept the same mix. Well, I had to change up the mix. I had to get more protein forward, right? So, so yes, if you're actually more active and if you're doing the strength training, then really it's more like the range between 1.4 grams to 1.6 grams. 1.6 to 1.8 is really where more elite athletes are seeing benefits. You know, Anything beyond 1.8, the literature shows there's no added benefit to that. You can still eat it. There might be some downsides in terms of digestion. There might be downsides in terms of kidney function if you've got impaired kidney function already. You've got to be careful about eating too much. But if you are going to overeat any of the macros, that's the best one to overeat because the protein can be broken down into whatever it needs to be in the body. So, but ultimately, I'm settled at about 1.5 to 1.6 grams per kilogram for my body weight, and I've backed that up by looking at formulas that estimate that need based on your lean body mass as well. So and so using the two formulas, it is working out into within about 5 grams of the same range. So um, so and that's definitely something I could go into more deeply with people. More of these metrics, um, and how to determine what's best for you. Again, pointing you at various resources and that sort of thing. I can do that offline, and I can do that in additional master classes if desired or discussions. So I think the key thing here is at least start looking at your protein and your fiber and your hydration, right? If you look at nothing else, look at those three, and then fundamentally the next thing is overall caloric intake, and then the rest as you feel you can manage it, right? So then there's fitness metrics, and that includes your weight, your lean mass or lean mass index. The lean mass index is really your lean mass divided by the square of your height. These are in metric units. So these are important things to keep an eye on. And the interesting thing weight, using weight to determine, the next one, basal metabolic rate. There's a lot of formulas out there for BMR or RMR, and a lot of them are based on your overall body weight. Well, in my case, they were wholly wrong because one, I was severely obese, and same thing with the protein calculation. If I used 353 pounds as my starting body weight for protein calculation or BMR, then I'm actually estimating poorly. I'm way overshooting. I need to use my target weight instead, right? I say target weight instead of ideal weight because ideal weights are a dream for most people these days, right? So target weight is where you reasonably and rationally think you can, be happy and sustain and want to get to, right? So for me, that's, my target is 180 pounds. I'm about 30 pounds away from that. Um, and although my ideal body weight, all the sources say is like 160, and it's like that's a dream. I'm never going to get to 160, and I'm not even going to try. So, so fundamentally, understanding your weight, but also understanding your composition, and specifically your lean mass, because again, the protein that we're going to feed, that we want to support um, metabolically, uh, is for this lean mass, right? So we want to supply enough protein to fuel regeneration, what they call, um, the protein synthesis, the muscle synthesis is muscle protein synthesis. I'm sorry, MPS. We want to fuel that with the protein that we get through our diet. So if we don't, we will start to um, self absorb. We will start to cannibalize our own muscle. So lean mass is also very important, as I said, for insulin sensitivity. It's also important for weight and all that stuff. So we can get a view of that by getting a DEXA scan. So here in Austin, we're very fortunate. We have several resources we can do that, and we can do that for as cheaply as $40 for one scan. Um, if you're doing it more regularly, you might be able to get it down to $30 to $35 a scan. But at most places you can get it for under $100. And so if you do it, again, if you don't do it like every quarter or something, that's fine. Do it once a year, do it every couple years. Like make sure that you're keeping on track. If you're in a rapid weight loss, you want to do it more quickly. So I wish I would have done it immediately when I started on GLP-1, and I wish I would have done it every couple months as I was doing this rapid weight loss, because a lot of my early weight loss was lean mass. So anyway, getting back to the key metrics, the basal metabolic rate, we want to understand, what our body consumes just by living, right? Then we want to look at total energy expenditure, which is that plus what we get by just moving around throughout the day through normal functioning, as well as what we add to that through exercise. And then there's also this cost of the food that we eat, right? So, the digestion of that food, the metabolism of that food. So TEF, thermal effective food, right? So all of that added up is your TDE, and it's good to understand that to understand what your how that balances to your intake, right? So we also want to track progression and power output of our exercising. So for my cardio, I want to look at the power output from my Peloton and from my rowing, and make sure that I'm either holding that steady or increasing over time. Um, I also track the duration of those workouts. For my weightlifting, I want to track the progression. I want to make sure that one, I'm tracking that I'm hitting all the major muscle groups, and that I'm increasing the amount of weight that I'm doing over time. for those, each of those muscle groups, and build from there. I also want to keep track of things like blood pressure. Um, this is a key thing, and interestingly, I read something this morning. Um, this is why you should always talk to your doctors about starting, new things, right? So strength training, especially heavy strength training, actually causes blood pressure to go up initially, and certainly while you're during the actual active exercise. So if you're not, if your blood pressure is not controlled, you shouldn't be doing that heavy strength training. You need to get that blood pressure under control first. So again, key metric. Um, so DEXA scans is one of the methods. I use Apple Health and Chronometer, and I use Heavy. It's an app that I use for strength training tracking. I use the Peloton app to track my, you know, um, my cycling cardio. I use Apple Fitness for my walking and my rowing. So in those cardio. So finally, there's the biomarkers, and key metrics there are glucose, right? We want to look at our comprehensive metabolic panel. Oops, I left a bullet in there accidentally. Fundamentally, if we're diabetic like me, you may also want to look at some additional things. But glucose is also very helpful, even if you're not diabetic. You know, in the community, in Bossie's community, in the Thrive community, we see a lot of discussion about insulin resistance and insulin sensitivity, right? So, having a CGM helps you see how foods you're dealing with affect that. Minimally, we should be regularly seeing what our A1C and fasting glucose look like in labs, right? So let's talk about reinforcing that metabolic infrastructure. I'm going to talk about it in terms of if I could start over back in 2023 when I started on Manjaro, this is what I would want to do, right? I would ask my doctor, knowing what I know today, I would ask the doctor all the questions I felt silly asking back then, right? Like, how should my diet change? How should I deal with what do I not know that I need to know? That's just a good frank one I should have asked, right? Um, she knew a lot more about it than I did. I hadn't read nearly enough. I only read about side effects. Um, so I would start tracking all of my intake, right? Initially focusing on protein, fiber, and hydration. Those three are key. Um, Protein is that fuel for the lean mass. Fiber and hydration keep things moving, right? Um, Fiber also has other huge benefits in terms of helping with your metabolic processes. There's benefit there as well. I would establish baseline biomarkers for A1C, my comprehensive metabolic profile. Um, Basically this UACR. It's about looking at creatinine in your urine and understanding. They also call it microalbumin, right? So this is for diabetics, right? Also EGFR. EGFR is an indicator of kidney health for diabetics, especially. Um, ApoB and Lipo-A, these are kind of new biomarkers around lipids, and they're better than LDL-C. They give more quality information than LDL-C does, and so I wouldn't say do them instead. CMP is there. The other lipid profile is part of the CMP, but these are additional information. I would immediately start resistance training, building to 4 days a week. Um, you know, um, Spreading it out over 4 days makes it so you can do it shorter. It makes it so you can be more intense and more intentional in those shorter workouts. There was a while where I was doing 2-hour workouts and it was killing me. So I switched that out and reduced to 4 days and 45 to 60 minutes a workout. And there's a lot of rests in between every set, right? So 2 to 3 minutes, depending on the workout that I'm doing. So I'm not working out that whole time. I'm actually doing rests in there as well. And that rest is part of your recovery that drives your gains. So these are all key things to do. I'd immediately start cardio. I'd do that secondarily to the resistance training, but I would want to start that immediately. I didn't do that for a year after starting the GLP-1, and I started there. It took me another 6 months to start the resistance training, and even then, I only did arms. It took another 3 months to start doing my legs, which are the biggest muscles. So on the cardio, I'd want to build to 7 days a week, and that's where I'm at now. So I'm at these targets: 4 days a week of resistance training and 7 days a week of cardio. In honesty, I only got to 7 days of cardio. I'm sorry, I'm not at 7 days of cardio. I'm only there this week. Um, Prior to that, I was 7 days of workouts, cardio or resistance training. And this week, I'm at on the fourth day of 7 days of cardio and um, resistance training. So I would get a CGM, continuous glucose monitor, to observe how various food choices affect my glucose. Fundamentally, it's taught me a lot. It took me a year and a half to get one, and I regret not getting it right away. And by the way, you don't have to be diabetic to get it. They both Dexcom and um, Libra have devices that are marketed for non-diabetics, and I think they come out to between $50 and $75 for a month's worth. So you get two of them; they last 2 weeks. So again, even if you do it one time, maybe you buy two of them, do it for 2 weeks, and take the second one and use it 6 months down the road. See what you can learn based on how you're progressing. So I would immediately get dietary counseling from a well-qualified registered dietitian. So I say well-qualified registered dietitian because there's a lot of dietitians out there that are sort of feeding to the masses. You show up and they hand you a pamphlet, and it's like, oh, thanks. I could get that from, a quick Google search. Um, I wanted to focus on somebody with some real clinical experience, working with people with different conditions, including diabetes, with people who are on GLP-1s and who had a background in exercise physiology, right? And actually, the one I found was an expert in all three. So she had patients across all three, and I was like, okay, I found the right one. And she affirmed a lot of what I learned. Again, this was more than a year and a half into it, but she affirmed a lot of what I had already learned, and she helped really clarify where I needed to be in terms of carbohydrates, and really gave clarity where I couldn't find clarity online, even in the literature, for my specific cases. Right, going hard on resistance training and cardio while on a GLP-1 and diabetic. Right, so there's a lot going on there to manage. So So those are the key things I would do over. There's a lot more little ones, but these are the ones that I would do, and probably in that order. So, so that leaves me with questions for you to ponder. Right? What infrastructure are you reinforcing or ignoring? What are you measuring? What are you currently measuring or assuming? Right? Or presuming? Maybe assuming's a little too harsh. A lot of us are, we've self-educated, and the key is, the difference between assumption and presumption is, presuming is informed assuming. So, we use the knowledge that we've developed to make educated guesses. And so, presumptions are great. They're better than assumptions, but they're still not as good as observation, right? As actual measurements. And so that's my key takeaway. Um, and so, how are your current habits supporting your longevity? And with that, I'll leave it open to any other questions.
I just want to say that power to you. It's really neat how really used this journey to empower yourself and to learn so much about how to support yourself in all these different ways physically, but like you said, that's all connected to all the other spheres of life. So I'm sure that this has helped you in a lot of different areas. Um, I guess my question is how are you different today compared to when you started this journey? And you've mentioned some of it, but just like in how you go through your life and how you feel, like how has this affected the other areas of your life?
Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, I'd start with saying that um, fundamentally, I used to think about food all the time, but I was thinking about, something yummy to eat. I was thinking about what am I going to eat today? What am I gonna enjoy? Is it going to be good enough? You know, it was always about that next high, fundamentally, the next food high. And, I still think about food all the time. But now I'm thinking about how am I going to get the nutrition I need, right? How am I going to fuel the workout? Um, how am I going to get all my calories today? How am I going to get, um, all my carbohydrates in, right? Or wait, I changed something today. How do I need to change my carbs, right? So, um, or I'm looking at my CGM and seeing that I had some dips into the red overnight. So, okay, how do I need to change my timing so that I don't do that, right? Interestingly, all of my glucose lows, um, and I've had a lot of them over the last few months because I was under fueling and overworking, right? And so I was experiencing all these glucose lows, like below 70, like 70 to 53. My body would kick back in at 53 and cause things to go back up. But again, when it's kicking in like that, sometimes it's at the expense of the progress that I'm trying to make, right? So so what I had to figure out was how do I make sure I don't get those lows. I want to stay out of the red. I want to keep above 70 as much as I can. And that means pre-fueling for workouts. It means spreading the carb load throughout the day. It means making sure that I'm doing protein and fiber as much as I can with those carbs throughout the day. Um, and in the case of my weightlifting workouts, I had to scale back. Like I said, I was doing 2 hours of very heavy lifting and not fueling during it, right? I started pre-fueling before, but even that wasn't enough. So if you work out for more than 45 to 60 minutes, you almost surely need to refuel in that before that 45 to 60 minute time point, right? Um, so I've learned a lot about how to think about food differently, right? And so um, the big question is going to be, and there's not enough literature out there to know what's going to happen when I come off of this Manjaro, which is taking away the food noise, right? The cravings and the interest in food in that sort of way, right? Will it come back? Last week I actually went down one level in the dosage. So I'd been at 7.5 milligrams for most of that 2 years, 2.5 years, um, for two of those 2.5 years. And I've gone back down to 5 now because I needed to do that to be able to eat the 2,500 calories and sustain the protein on a daily basis. So how else has that changed? I mean, fundamentally, I want to work out every day, and even the days that I don't really want to, right? Um, I make myself get past it, and 5 minutes into it, I'm like, oh God, I want to again, right? So, um, and it feels great. Um, I think a lot of people, your sister included, Vasi, would probably say I've gotten annoying about talking about health and longevity and proper nutrition and all these things, right? It consumes most of my waking hours. So I'm not only passionate about it, it's kind of become a way of life, and I want to infect everybody because we all deserve happy, healthy, long lives, right? So clearly there was the 140-pound weight loss. I'm wearing clothes in normal sizes now, right? Large and extra large, and I used to be 3X big and tight in those, right? My waist went from 58 inches. My pant size now is 36. Um, so these are huge changes. This is great. More importantly, all of my biomarkers are in the green zones. I don't know if that's ever happened before because I never, when I was a teen, I didn't get biomarkers. But by the time I was in my early 20s in college, I was already, addicted to soda and, had already screwed up biomarkers by then, right? Um, and so my blood pressure is controlled, my diabetes is controlled. I've eliminated two um, blood pressure medications. I've just reduced a third one, and they're going to try to keep me on that third one as long as they can because it has renal protective capacity, and they want all diabetics to be on it, frankly, but only if you can tolerate it. So they're going to try to keep me on it unless I can't tolerate it. But I've already had to lower it because I had blood pressure dropping out. So yeah, and fundamentally the energy is through the roof. I've always been what I'd considered energetic, but this is a whole different level of energy. The fact that I can work out 7 days a week, sometimes two workouts a day, as I'm doing this week, right? Um, and this past weekend I did a 90-minute ride, and I was like, wow! And I did it. It was a recovery ride. So I kept my previously I was having my Peloton be sort of my go hard exercise, and it wasn't cardio. It was really anaerobic. I was staying in zone 4 and zone 5 heart rate for most of the ride because I just loved it, and it was intense. And so basically, I tried this experiment. Let me do first. It was just a regular class, and do it by staying in zone 2, and make it really truly aerobic. And that was really easy. I was surprised, and actually my calories burned was significantly closer than I ever thought it would be to, my high burn rate. And so again, wow, big lesson. I learned something. So so this last Sunday I did a 90-minute ride and staying in that zone 2. And I got to the end of it and I was like, gosh, maybe I'll stop, or maybe I'll do another 90 minutes. And then I stopped and said, you know what? It's great to have that choice. I think I'll stop, and maybe another time I'll do a 2-hour ride. So just the realization of that choice. I think I mentioned that on the community, right? It was liberating, right? So yeah, that's just a sampling of what's changed for me.
Nice. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, what strikes me is that um, you did start this kind of looking for solutions, immediate solutions to the diabetes, to needing to lose weight, and yet you've really done the work of actually creating strength in your body, of actually changing your habits. It seems like some people approach the GLP-1s as kind of a instant solution. I don't have to do anything else. I don't have to change my eating. I'll just eat less. I don't have to add in more movement. And you can do it that way, but that's when you're probably more likely to experience more side effects, losing muscle, actually becoming weaker. I've, heard that from some stories where people do become weaker when they take the drugs. So it just, yeah, really, it's inspiring to hear how you've really established these patterns for yourself to create more health and vitality for life with or without these drugs. And I can say from my experience with intermittent fasting, I have very similar kind of results. So that might be something you can think about as you come off of these drugs. You do have less food noise, or that's been my experience because it just like stabilizes the blood sugar so much.
Right. Right.
That I don't have the cravings as much. There are times when I do, if I choose to eat more treats or whatever, I'll get more cravings. So it's kind of a dance that I'm learning to work within because I'm okay with having cravings sometimes as long as I know how to, turn them off and not have to deal with that all the time because it's overwhelming as before your
Yeah.
journey you had those
Yeah.
cravings, you had that food noise. So yeah, there are definitely similarities. And I've also learned that the protein piece was really important. I wasn't getting enough in the beginning. And to maintain muscle, to build muscle, to get stronger, I really needed to up my protein. I'm not measuring it like you are. I really appreciate how you're really specific with that. I just make sure I get protein at every meal. But
Mhm.
I wanted to check in if Elena had any questions.
Yeah.
Oh, it's amazing story, Charles. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
It's yeah. I learned even some new words. Dynapenia.
Ah, yes. Yeah, that was a new word for me as well, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, we find that in literature. There's a small group that's focused on that, as a difference from sarcopenia because um, it's not just the muscle mass that changes your strength. There's also signaling changes, and the this is neuro from the brain through the nervous system to the muscles. These are signal pathways that not getting exercised also cause strength loss, and that strength loss happens faster than the muscle loss does as we age.
Yeah, yeah. So, by the way, do you know Dr. Rita Marie Loscalzo?
Mm-mm.
So she's holistic endocrinologist, and she lives here in Austin also.
Okay.
So she works on balance the hormones of the body and all this stuff, and she's always invited on summits that talk about health, like Dr. Khan. It's a famous cardiologist. He lives in Detroit, but he's very much on internet organizing summits and stuff like this. Yeah. So, but yeah. So this DEXA scan isn't this
Mhm.
about the bones?
So there's two different types of DEXA scan. There's one that's more focused on your bone density, right? And then there's what they
Mhm.
call the composition scan. So the first one's a clinical one, and the second one is a non-clinical scan. So in Austin, you can get it at a lot of different doctors' offices, but there's also one or more um, third-party places. There's one called Body Spec that I use. So you can do it through the University of Texas. Um,
Mm,
they have a place where you can go and get different measurements, including this DEXA scan, and it's called a composition DEXA, and it gives you your percent of body fat, your percent of lean mass, not just percents, but your composition in terms of
mm,
fat mass, lean mass, bone mineral content,
no,
and it'll even do it regionally. So arms and legs are appendicular, and then it's got the torso and the head is separate, right? So
mm, mm,
um, being able to look at that, really can help. And by the way, if you're interested in that, by all means, DM me offline, and I can get you a coupon for it's like a $5 or $10 discount. So
but it has to be done through doctor's office. You cannot find
no,
a place.
no.
No?
The body spec place, they do it. They actually have trucks that they place all over town. There's probably 20 locations that they do it, and you just have to make an appointment and show up.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's very convenient.
Yeah,
That's the one I'm using, and
I see. I see.
so
So I'm sort of not very fond on different measurements somehow. So,
well,
but
this one is sobering because you also get a sort of it gives you an X-ray kind of view of your bones, of your lean mass, and of your fat mass,
mhm.
and so it's got your silhouette, and so you
Oh,
can see all your curves, and then the fat mass is always higher for most people. I think it's your first one. Your fat mass is going to be higher than you expect, right? Um,
probably.
yeah, I did a bunch of calculators based on what I saw online, and I was like, okay, this is semi-recently, right? Maybe 6 months ago, and I calculated my fat mass to be around 25%. Wrong. This is based on taking measurements, right, of various parts of my body and then running it through a calculator. Um, but the DEXA scan showed it was actually about 35%.
Mm,
And so from October to February, I'd lost, it's down, it was down 3%. So,
mm.
so, I'm taking that down further, right?
So I can search on internet body spec and it
Yeah,
will
yep,
show me the
yeah,
location.
bodyspec.com. Yeah,
Bodyspec.com.
yep, B
BOBYSPEC.
BODY. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Of course, body. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. BODY. Yeah. Okay.
Um, so yeah, I just want to thank you again, Charles, for taking time to share with us. And before I stop the recording, do you want to share where people can find you who are watching the replay?
Sure. Definitely, if you're part of the Thrive community, you can mention me in a posting there, and I'll happily join in a conversation. Also on the internet, my web address is charlesfielder.com. So first name, last name.com. And I'm also on LinkedIn and Facebook using those same names.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Really appreciate you sharing your journey.
Thanks for having me.